Hello, Jiu-Jitsu nerds. I am being joined on a very special day to talk some Jiu-Jitsu drama. It is the one and only Matt Skaff, 10th Planet Decatur black belt, BMAC's first black belt, the guy who is training a bunch of MMA fighters and potentially some competitors in the Craig Jones Invitational. I see some manifestation online from one of your guys, Thompson.
Yeah, no, Travis is an up and coming guy right now. He's done phenomenal. He's done some of the biggest shows. He's done Subversive. He's been on CJJ. He's probably a year or two away from ADCC and Craig Jones Invitational. But I always tell my guys, confidence is one of the most important aspects of being a competitor and just being a grappler. We don't even have to be a competitor. You need to believe in yourself and your techniques. And I'd rather you be overly confident than underconfident. And so I always tell the guys, go out there, shoot your shot. You never know. And I definitely think Travis would be a good addition to any tournament out there, even a tournament like the CJI. But yeah, no, he's definitely shooting his shot, and we'll see. But I think a lot of people are trying to get a part of the CGI right now.
And I know one of the matches that he was looking forward to at ADCC trials was against J-Rod, and then that ended up not happening. So I feel like him getting into CJI would be fun because there's a bunch of B-team matchups, I'm sure, that could go from there.
Yeah, and his first round matchup at ADCC trials, the West Coast, was against a B-team guy. I believe he's a brown belt from there, and the guy was super good. But yeah, it'd be cool to have more matches, with some of the top level guys. And I think a lot of you guys are going to be very aware of who Travis Thomas is in the next year or so.
I love it. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of platforms on the rise. PGF is one of them, one that you've worked super, super closely with. So you kind of have a pretty good perspective on the different formats that there are. But now we're getting CJI, which is looking to do a completely different thing with jiu-jitsu. Have you been able to look into the rule set that Craig is looking to implement?
Yeah, I listened to the episode. I actually just finished earlier this morning where he was on Joe Rogan, and he was kind of explaining it. And so he's looking to do more of an AIGA rule set. So AIGA does the rounds, right? They do 3 5-minute rounds. And no offense to AIGA, I hate it's been so hard to follow AIGA. I mean, they just had some of their matches down there, or their team competition down in Brazil. And it's just always been really tough. I feel like it stalls out, and there's just been technical issues. The grappling in the format, I think, is amazing. I think when they figure that out, they're going to be a huge, huge, huge player going forward, because they're obviously giving a lot of money away as well. But yeah, if you know anything about AIGA, Craig sounds like he's going to do a similar format where they're doing rounds, but instead of having, because in AIGA they still do points, and in the CGI, it sounds like he wants to actually have 3 people, and they're going to do open scoring. So one of the big criticisms a lot of people have with boxing and MMA is that you just don't know who's winning the fight in between rounds. And there have been countless times at the end of fights where one of the judges, or sometimes more, and it's very unfortunate when there's more than one, that just completely come out of nowhere and they give the fight to the wrong guy. And obviously public perception, at times is wrong, but most people, it's like when you watch a fight, some of these fights are pretty easy to score, and still the judges get it wrong. In an open scoring format, the judges would have to give the score of the round right after it happened. So going into round 2, you would know how the first round was. The fighters and the coaches would know what happened. Okay, this is how the fighters saw it, or this is how the judges saw it. And a lot of people argue that people would be gaming the system more that way, because you could go, hey, I've won the first 2 rounds. All I need to do is coast. Just don't get submitted or don't get finished in this 3rd round. But honestly, most of these guys, they're either killers or not, And so the guys that are going to try and win on points are always going to try and win on points. And the guys that are going to try to kill are always going to try to kill. So I like this idea. I've seen some negative this is like one of the few negative things I've seen people kind of push back on, this is a stupid, people have always kind of hated the boxing, that MMA brought in the boxing scoring system. But it's just universal. People understand the boxing. They understand MMA.
Do they?
Scoring.
Do they?
I think so. It's easy. It's 10-9. I mean, I don't understand because people are like, I just don't understand the scoring. And I'm like, it's so simple. 10-9, 10-8 if you think that one guy dominated, that there's almost a finish. And then very, very rarely would you see something like a 10-7.
Very, very interesting. So you think that it'll translate well into a grappling standpoint?
Yeah, my thing is that nobody wants to watch. Like, the longer the matches, the more people become disinterested usually. And so when we're talking about 20-minute ADCC, where the first 10 minutes is points, or excuse me, no points. And then the next, we're talking about the finals here. So they're 20-minute matches, and we're talking about first 10 minutes, no points, and then 10 minutes points. And then if there's not a score, we're going into an overtime. We're talking about 30-minute matches. And a lot of times in past ADCCs, we've seen some really boring matches with guys just not engaging for the first. And then now we're talking about a ref's decision, a 30-minute ref's decision. Some of those matches are absolutely unwatchable. I love the reset. Hey, let's get these guys out there, give them a little break in between the round. Let's go right back out there. And they're going to kind of know, like, hey, I lost the first round. So some of these guys are going to have to push. They're going to have to force the action. And we're talking about $1 million. I'm going to be very interested to see how that forces guys into taking chances and really who's willing to take breaks to try and win that 1 million.
Yeah, and they have 2.3 million dedicated to the athletes, and then the rest is going to production. And they have 2 divisions. So when we're looking at the people that are currently confirmed, we have Nikki Ryan, Joseph Chen, William Tackett, Mason Fowler, Andrew Tackett, Nicky Rod, Luke Rockhold. So when you're looking at those names, who is your favorite for the under 80 kg? And then who's your favorite for the over?
My big question about that division right now is Andrew Tackett's health, because he's been a guy that he is just on an absolute tear. He the way he beat PJ Barch at the who's number 1 event when they did the 4-man under 170-pound division, and he beat PJ, really out wrestled PJ, just really won most of his exchanges. You can see he kind of beat down PJ, and PJ was exhausted at the end. And I just feel like, looking at his style, looking at his growth, what he did at this previous ADCC, the ADCC West Coast Trials, where he beat Andy Varela, and he just looked absolutely incredible. And I really feel like he is one of the top 5, if not one of the top 2 or 3 at 170 pounds right now. I think it's him. I would put him above Nicky Ryan. I'd put him above Joseph Chen, even though they've had 2 matches and they are 1-1 against each other. And it's been a while since they've competed. And a lot of people really like Joseph. But I just love the athleticism, the confidence, and the swagger of Andrew Tackett. And he looks like a guy that believes and knows that he can win that $1 million. And so I would say he's the favorite in that division. And then the over, I would have to go with Nicky Rod. Coming off of obviously beating Mason Fowler. Looked really, really good there. His last match against Gordon Ryan was very competitive. I mean, he popped Gordon really, really badly. He's easily the favorite going into that division. He did lose, though. So I'm fascinated right now with the idea of Victor Hugo joining, because Victor Hugo very recently beat Nicky Rod. So you got to think, if he's like, hey, I've already beaten Nicky Rod, beat him, 6-2, something. I can't remember what the exact point scoring was, but beat him pretty handily, definitely beat Nicky Rod. I wonder if he's like, hey, if he's the favorite, I've got a recent victory over him. We're talking about $1 million here. So he's a guy that I'm looking at like, hey, I think he's going to join that division very soon.
In the under 80 kilograms, we're thinking Mika Galval might hop in there, but we have to wait until after the weekend, apparently, for him to make any decisions there. We do have a comment from MMA Sucka, and there's 21 people in this live chat right now, so that means we should have 21 likes so we can push this content out to people who want to be jiu-jitsu nerds and talk about the drama with our popcorn as we sit on our couches. From MMA Sucka, Craig mentioned something Rogan has spoken about a bit. If someone has someone's back or a sub sunk in at the end of a round, the round won't end until the escape.
Yeah, we just saw this recently
on the podcast. Did you hear that on the podcast?
Yeah,
I think I might have missed this part.
Yeah, I did hear that, and they were talking about that, and I like that. I mean, obviously, we saw that recently in the female championship, right? We saw Wiley Zhang have a fully locked in rear naked choke and put her opponent to sleep, right? And this is very controversial because opponent's out, but the round ended, and so she kind of wakes back up, stumbles to the stool, and people are like, that fight should have been over. And so I think in those like egregious cases where it's like, hey, we're talking about a fully locked in triangle choke, fully locked in chokes, I am very game for that. Now I think if the leg locks and some of those other positions might get a little bit more dicey, where especially when we're talking about $1 million here, this person just might not tap. But especially when like Nicky Rod had Gordon Ryan in a fully locked in rear naked choke at the end of that last overtime. And who knows, 10 more seconds, Gordon Ryan might have had to tap, but obviously the 2 minutes ended. So I'm definitely a fan of that when we're talking about chokes.
Yeah, I definitely think that would play a fun part. And a big reason why a lot of people are even considering doing the CJI tournament instead of the Olympics of Jiu-Jitsu, ADCC, is for that pay discrepancy. So I have a question about an event that took place a while ago. I don't know if you were following the sport super closely when Metamoris was a thing.
Yes, I was. I remember Metamoris very, very well.
What was kind of the energy around a promotion like that? Like, what was the purpose of that promotion? Like, what were they trying to do?
Yeah, Metamoris was fascinating. It was really ahead of its time. It was the first of the kind of branch off from IBJJF and especially from the gi. And so while they had gi matches on Metamoris, they also showcased no gi. And Metamoris put together some incredible cards. And obviously one of the big headlines, and I remember watching this at a Buffalo Wild Wings with about 30 other 10th Planet people, the Eddie versus Hoyler 2 match. And that was, I mean, one of the most iconic matches in jiu-jitsu history. And then obviously Eddie like really showcased, because for the longest time, a lot of people thought Eddie got lucky. And I can see, like, you watch the first match, it's like, when you watch that first match, it's Hoyler's dominant. He passes a bunch of time. Eddie uses that jailbreak to get back. And so people are like, look, Hoyler was dominating and got caught in a triangle. But that second match, I mean, Eddie went out there, dominated from start to finish, had him in the vaporizer for like 20 plus minutes. But Metamoris was, again, it was so ahead of its time. They were paying their athletes very, very well. There was another ACB at the Burkett. I just remember it was Burkett, and a lot of guys were going to Russia on these exclusive contracts, and they were getting paid very, very well. Now, the issue is these things didn't stay around. Metamoris, obviously known for not paying their athletes. Same thing with Burkett. I've heard some crazy things about that promotion in Russia, that it was like gangster money and all this stuff, but they also completely failed. And so a lot of athletes are probably like, hey, is this too good to be true? But when you show up with $1 million to Joe Rogan and put it on the table, like, that speaks volumes for the type of money you got in your bank.
Yeah, and we have the real official Craig Jones in the group chat right now, letting us know that they have the same accountant. Yeah, so what was your take on Craig showing up to Joe Rogan, having that money ready to go? Like, I feel like in the lead up to Craig kind of starting the beef with Mo, people were like, we can't really tell if he's joking or what his intentions are. So now that we have this event set on the same weekend as ADCC, what do you feel like is Craig's true intention with putting on this promotion?
I cannot say enough about how good that podcast was. Craig was phenomenal on the Rogan show. And, you know, I try to stay very, I don't take sides. I'm not like a Gordon guy. I just try to call it as I see it. And that podcast was phenomenal. Craig was funny, but he really showcased his intentions, I feel like. And a lot of people, they take Craig Jones' Instagram and they make that his whole persona. But Craig knows how to make the needle move, right? He knows how to get people interested. And so, yeah, to grow his social media followings in minute clips, it's very, hey, we're going after ADCC. Hey, you know, there's a little bit more drama involved. But, I mean, how can you not get behind somebody that's talking about who's somebody that's talking about giving money to the athletes and making it a nonprofit, giving money to charity, doing all of that stuff. And I mean, I know a lot of people Craig is trying to destroy ADCC, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes for the growth of sports or just the growth of any business, right? You need healthy competition. And if somebody's not willing to grow, clearly ADCC has shown for 20 years, they're not willing to raise their prize money. They're not willing to do certain things for the athletes. I mean, how long has it taken to just get more female divisions? And they're still only doing 8. The fact that the females still had to compete, the one East Coast trials to West Coast trials, just really shows to me how unwilling ADCC is to work with the athletes. They are one of those organizations that's like, we are bigger. It's kind of like, hey, you're wearing the ADCC jacket. It's not about the name on the back of the jersey, right? And you'll hear that times. There's teams that go, hey, we're the New York Yankees. You're going to fall in. It's not about the name. It's about you're a Yankee, right? Well, ADCC has kind of done the same thing where it's like, no, you're an ADCC. You should just be grateful to be here. But the athletes are pushing back, and they realize that they are the stars of the show. And I mean, how many things can you think of in the past 20 years that has increased in price? We can all name a million things, from gas prices to just going to your local grocery store. And when you see that something is the same from the early 2000s to 2024, it really shows lack of growth and just lack of, I mean, look, I was there at the beginning of the PGF. I've commentated hundreds of hours of PGF footage. And we started in a gym, and now 6 seasons later, they gave out $150,000. So I just have a hard time understanding how ADCC in 20 plus years has not figured out how to make money and not figured out how to pay the athletes more.
Yeah, I 100% hear you there. And MMA Succook said that Craig did great on aerial today. I think all of the jiu-jitsu practitioners using their platform to kind of get their voice out there has been super, super interesting. One of them was Fionn Davis, who took to her YouTube channel why she is doing CJI over ADCC. They have yet to figure out who her super fight is against, but I thought she shared like a lot of important information that I actually was completely unaware of. Someone commented on my first live chat. They said, for the girls only make $6K to win. And then I responded to his comment like, oh, where do you find that information? And then Fionn went on her YouTube channel and let us know that, for the girls to win, it's $5K. And that the experience as an athlete was hard because they're going into competition mode, but they have to share a room on the strip with someone that they don't know. And there's all these different things that have been kind of frustrating her without her really being able to voice it so much because, she's the ADCC champ and there was no other option. But it's kind of an awesome thing to see, like when you're trying to get a raise at any job, the only way to get that raise sometimes is to get a better offer somewhere else and threaten to leave the one job. So Fionn is, of course, taking the lead. She is a girl that has been vocal even before, like, having a stand on this was popular, because like when Polaris wasn't making women's divisions, she was the first one to really put her foot down and voice that on the Get a Grip with Kendall Rusing podcast, and they really voiced their efforts, and then Polaris made the change. So I feel like Fionn is really like the trailblazer in that sense. And then when she was the first female to be announced, I was like, okay, that doesn't surprise me, because she is the one that always, I feel like, puts her foot first on these type of things.
Well, Fionn, she also moves the needle. She's got a lot of fans out there. And I obviously work with a lot of female athletes, and I love female jiu-jitsu. But I'm not one of those that's like, hey, we need to make, like, if, Polaris has 5 events, 2 of those main events need to be female. To me, it should always be about, can you sell? Do you have fans? Like, do you have a fan base? Do you have people that are going to support you? Do you move the needle, right? And she does that, right? So when she makes demands, it's not the same as, somebody else. Like, she is one of the stars of the sport. And I mean, when, again, ADCC is kind of making her it's an 8-person division. She's only making $5,000. I mean, she could go do 2 seminars easily, maybe even 1. I don't know what she would charge, but she might even just be able to go do 1 seminar for $5,000. And she didn't have to compete. They're going to give her her own room. They're going to treat her like a queen. And that's what I think some of these athletes are looking for. I mean, when you're talking about Craig Jones, like Craig Jones isn't going to show up and compete for free. You know what I'm saying? Like Craig Jones is making, who knows, he's making tens of thousands of dollars a month doing so many different things. And so for a lot of these athletes, it just doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on this super fight between Craig Jones and Gabby Garcia?
So I'm a big fan of freak matchups. I really felt like there's been some missed opportunities in the past for the UFC to have, and they've tried it a couple times, obviously bringing in, they brought in some professional wrestling. I mean, when CM Punk came in, that was definitely kind of a little bit of a freak show. I like it in small doses. And so to me, this is perfect. Like 1 or 2 matches on a card. So let's say there's going to be 70 matches. I don't know what, not 70, but let's just say there's going to be 50 matches at the CGI between the brackets and some super fights. I would love one, like a freak matchup like that, where you've got Gabby Garcia, who any male under 200 pounds has had the thought when they're watching Gabby, like, how would I do against Gabby? And I remember watching her roll with Marcela Garcia long time ago, an MG in Action video, and I was like, Jesus, what that woman, like, I cannot imagine, because I've seen Marcelo just destroy dudes, like, right, especially in some of those MG in Actions. He's rolled with tons of world champions and just destroyed, and Gabby was giving him a tough time back then. So I'm like, man, Craig Jones versus Gabby Garcia, that needs to happen, right? And Craig calling it right there, like, imagine if she mother milks Craig Jones. Talk about an event blowing up. And it's one of those matches, like, what do you expect? Like, what do we expect is going to happen? You know, some people
especially because Craig can't really focus on his training so much right now. Like, he's on full
I think Craig, listening to like a guy like Joe Rogan, just doesn't understand. Craig is in his element when he's just being himself and he's living life. Some of these guys, they need to, like Mikey Musumeci, they're like locked in a dungeon somewhere and they're just drilling all day. There are athletes out there that perform better just with looser, hey, I'm going to go out there. He's going to train a little bit, but he's not going to put in full training camp for Gabby Garcia. He's going to go out there. He's going to have fun. He's probably going to have 2 or 3 beers, and it's going to be entertaining. I mean, I am 100% watching already the Craig Jones Invitational. Rad, like, I'm not watching ADCC. I might watch the finals, but I am not tuning in to ADCC. And like, from what I'm already seeing, like, who are they going to have? And since Craig's listening, I was saying, all you have to do is take the exciting grapplers. Nobody wants to watch Yuri Samoas go against Roosevelt Souza. Great grapplers, incredible grapplers, world champions, but people want to watch the Tackett's. They want to watch J-Rod. They want to watch Nicky Rod. They want to watch these guys that are exciting and putting on a performance. So when I see, like, hey, first round matchup is like Wagner Rocha versus like Josh Hinger, I'm like, I've already said that's awful. Nobody wants to watch that. We want to watch these young, exciting grapplers mixed in with some legends. And I think we're all super excited to see who Craig is going to bring next. But he's changing the game.
I definitely feel like the friendship that he has made with the people at Karate Combat has helped a lot in kind of bringing this vision to life so quickly, because the platform that they're going to be doing it on is very similar to the pit, and that's going to eliminate the people running off the set and referees having to reset positions and all that. So what is your take on this competition with the 3 times 5 minute rounds, 10-8 judges inside the not the pit but the alley? Like, how do you think that's going to change things, not only for the athletes but also for viewership?
Again, I love it. And again, I've heard people criticize we don't need, and because this has been brought up plenty of times before. I know a couple of other promotions have tried this, very small promotions. have tried the 10-8 scoring or the 10-9 scoring system in grappling. But again, I absolutely love it. It's just, it lets the viewer know and the athletes know and the coaches know how the judges have scored that round. It's just so simple. And with it being open, we're not going to be surprised at the end of a round if a guy like, if Nicky Ryan's going against Andrew Tackett and we're just like, Nicky Ryan wins or Andrew Tackett wins. And, if we're all like disagreeing, if everybody's like, oh my God, it's a horrible decision, it just kind of takes some of that away because and the athletes can kind of know, okay, they're prioritizing submission attempts more than position, or I had a couple of submission attempts, but Nicky Ryan got a mount back take. And even though he didn't get a submission, he had control for a minute and a half. They're prioritizing that. And it lets you just know what the judges are looking for. And it's, again, only good like for the viewer as well as the competitor. And it's just bringing unity to the already popular sports of boxing and MMA. When we go, hey guys, no, this is the rule set. We're doing exactly what they're doing. It's just going to be 3 5-minute rounds versus a 10-minute round. Like, love it. And I didn't understand because like Rogan was just like, this was just mind blowing to me because Rogan was just like, well, I don't understand the pit idea. Doesn't that like that hurt Philip Rowe? And it's like, of course it did. Philip Rowe was going backwards. He was trying not to disengage, and there should be consequences to that. And so I know Craig talked about having a much bigger, like it's going to be a much, much bigger, almost like a basketball court, right? With the pit. And that's going to look sick. I would actually even like it to be a little bit less because some of these dudes, now the names they've brought on, like, I don't see any of those guys backing down. But I don't know. I'm a huge fan of what Craig's doing right now.
Can you kind of walk us through how the Mason Fowler versus Nicky Rod recent matchup went? Because I missed that one, and I feel like since we know that match could potentially happen, that's an interesting one for us to talk about.
Okay. So very interesting matchup. We see it was really just a battle of the half guard and rubber guard, right? So Mason, one of the few guys outside of 10th Planet that utilizes rubber guard. He's got a very, very high level rubber guard on both sides. And it was fascinating to watch Nicky Rod try and beat the bottom knee of the rubber guard. And at the beginning, the first 5 minutes, Mason was winning the match. Like the first half of the match, Mason was winning the match. He was countering Nicky Rod very well. He was getting into his offense. But playing bottom offense on a guy like, hey, I'm going to choose the bottom position and I'm going to try and wrestle up, which Mason did very well. He tried a couple times to wrestle up. Plus, like, hey, I'm going to try this rubber guard. I'm going to try to get into omoplatas and different setups like that. That just wears on you. And Nicky Rod kept a very good pace, kept entering into that battle. You could see he felt very, very confident fighting Mason Fowler in that arena, right? In that kind of half guard, rubber guard type position. And he eventually ended up getting the pass. And I believe he won 8-0, but it was more like it was a pretty dominant victory, especially that last 3 minutes. He really wore down Mason. And I have a hard time seeing Mason beating Nicky in that type of rule set, like an ADCC. Obviously, this was just at the UFC, for the UFC, for the Fight Pass Invitational. And even in this 3 5-minute rounds, I think Mason, it could be a little closer because, again, I would have given the first round to Mason Fowler. Second round would have been close, but I could see it being a more competitive match. And I would love to see a rematch in the CGI, but I imagine they'd probably be on opposite side of brackets because those are two of the really 5 or 6 best guys in the world right now in that over 80 kilogram for that 80 kilogram division.
And we still don't know the full roster for CJI, but I was at ADCC West Coast Trials and I saw Michael Perez win the over 99 kilogram division. For some reason, I don't think that he's going to be one to drop out of ADCC or be invited by Craig. But we also have Pixley. So what is your take on the potential for him?
Yeah, I see that. And I kind of feel like the Pedigo crew is pretty close with Mo. So I'm looking more at relationships here, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you choose the CGI, you're essentially I don't want to say flipping Mo off, but essentially Mo's going to take it like that. Mo seems to be a pretty sensitive guy and a guy that, takes things pretty hard. And so I think when I look at the Pedigo guys, it just seems like they've got a very good relationship with Flo. Obviously, Flo's done a lot of like the little documentaries on them. They had their little TV show on there. They're constantly being featured on WNO. I'm looking at more like a brand. It's kind of like, are you a Nike school or an Adidas school, right? In basketball. And like some guys are going to go, hey, like I'm a Nike guy. So you're going to go to certain schools. Same thing with Adidas. I kind of see it more like this. I see the Pedigo guys, New Wave guys. They're going to stick with ADCC if I had to guess.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I don't know. I feel like we could see one or two switch over, but we'll see.
I mean, $1 million.
That's a serious. And also, I wanted to touch on the fact that you said Mo like might be taking things personally and stuff. I've only seen one recent interview. I don't know how recent it was, like if everything was already fully announced, but he had a very calm and stoic demeanor. And he was basically just like, there's plenty of people that want to compete at ADCC. There was one ADCC where we had 19 people drop out because of injuries. So we're not worried, but we haven't seen him on the ADCC live chat, answering all the trolls and ADC supporter questions. But it seems like he's like being cool about this. And I think in other live chats, he mentioned like, yeah, I don't take any of this stuff personally. When Craig Jones's brother was in the ADC live chat being like, does this mean I can't go to ADCC anymore? Are my tickets revoked? And like everything was fine, but this was before CJI was announced. So yeah, I'm very interested to see the next live chat and where we go from there from Mo's side. But there's like, at this point, I feel like you just kind of have to handle it with grace, because like what can you do if someone wants to leave to compete for $1 million? Like, you can't really hate on them for it.
Sometimes guys, especially when they know they're being filmed, anybody can be seem stoic in the moment, right? You put a camera on somebody, they're like, guys,
everything's cool.
They're like, guys, it's okay. We're ADCC still. They keep talking about prestige. And you've seen some of the big names, obviously like Tom DeBlas and I'm sure Gordon and Merritt. Like they're like, no, we compete for prestige. You know how easy it is to make $1 million? That's their argument. It's like, guys, making $1 million. How have you not done that yet? Right? Well, 99% of grapplers haven't figured out the secret formula, right? So there's just either a lot of dumb, we haven't figured out the secret that's made it so easy, right? And so, you're going to hear a lot about prestige. You're going to hear a lot like Mo's like, look, we're ADCC. We've been around for 20 plus years. We're going to be around 20 plus more. But deep down, in there, in the heart, in the places we can't see of Mo Jasm, he's having an absolute meltdown. Absolute meltdown. I guarantee he has broken things in his house. He has had hour upon hour long conversations with multiple people in the sport. I am sure that behind the scenes, if we could only be a fly on that wall, there would be some very interesting conversations happening in the ADCC war room right now.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel bad in the sense that, he puts in a lot of work, and I feel like the intention of going to T-Mobile Arena and spending that $2 million was to really help towards the marketing side. But then now we're getting all the athletes coming out and saying, well, we don't care where we compete. Like no sense of gratitude towards his effort towards this, because all of his efforts have been more towards the audience and wanting to make it an experience for them. So I do understand his perspective on it. But yeah, the payout is just so bad. And my kind of idea on the payout should be ADCC is only like every 2 years. So you would have to think that the prize money has to be 2 years worth of salary. If you're trying to be a professional grappler and you're, albeit Olympics, the highest goal that you could make is the ADCC champion, then that pay should be at least a salary. So I was thinking like the very minimum that it should be would have to be 100K, because that means you're making 50K a year in salary terms, if you want to look at it like that. And then 50K if you're living in LA, Miami, New York, that's nothing. But like if jiu-jitsu is at the point where that is, you know, the amount of money that someone should be making for being a jiu-jitsu athlete, then okay. I mean, you look at what people are making in the WNBA versus NBA. Like, so there's just different ways to look at how we should be measuring up what the jiu-jitsu salary should be. But I think something that you have to take into consideration is that ADCC is only every 2 years. It's not every 1 year. So you can't look at ADCC as like a salary. Like, it has to be twice that because it's only happening.
Well, this is what I tell my guys, because they always ask, you know, hey, why don't you compete anymore? And I competed a bunch coming up, and I did a couple of bigger tournaments. I was there when Gordon won. Like, I was in the 155-pound division, but when he did the first finishers ever in New Jersey, he was in the 170-pound division, and he showed up in a Scorpion outfit, so it was a full Mortal Kombat outfit. And anyways, I was in the weight division under. And I've done multiple like tournaments like that. And here's the thing. While I would have good showings, the last tournament I ever did was 5 or 6 years ago. It was a 32-man tournament. Winner won 5K. Well, I won my first 2 matches and then lost to one of Cyborg's black belts in the quarterfinals. And I walk away with nothing. You know what I'm saying? So it was like, I mean, I was pretty good competitor, but I was never good enough. And I kind of realized, especially the older I got, like I was never going to win ADCC. Like, I just kind of reality hits, but I was never good enough to win those 4 matches and beat, hey, all those things. There would always be one DDS guy in there, or there'd be this guy or that guy. And I might have a good performance, but I didn't get paid for it. And I'm actually the one spending $600-700, and obviously with ADCC, you make it, you're getting, a free ride out there. You're having to go and share a hotel room with another athlete. But here's the thing Craig said that I think we all should really think about. All they had to do was up the prize money to $20,000 for each division. That's not asking a lot. Like I said, the PGF, I mean, I was there from the beginning. Like, literally, they just gave out $150,000. And they went from being like, we went from being at our gym on our mats to just using this church down the street that had a pretty cool little venue to being in Vegas. So I'm just like, how? I don't understand. And I just don't want to buy the production costs. Like, nobody cares about the pride announcer. Nobody cares about the drums. We're there to see the athletes. And we want to see the athletes get what they deserve. And just, it's honestly a slap in the face that, I mean, couldn't do 10 to 20K, but you could go from a arena that costs, $30,000-40,000 a day to one that's $2 million for the week. Like, it just doesn't add up. Like, I'm like, why are we going to T-Mobile Arena? Why didn't you just stay? Everybody I know, we had tons of students, and I know tons of people that went to ADCC at the Thomas Mack Center in 2022, and they had an absolute blast. They said it was a phenomenal show. They were excited to go back again, but they didn't need T-Mobile Arena. Like, they didn't go somewhere else. There's so many other places that they could have gone, and they could have went, hey, we're going to just bump the 10 to 20. But in reality, I mean, I think they could easily do a 50K prize if they wanted to, but they don't want to, because they feel like ADCC is this, like, we are above, and they really do believe they're at the Olympics of our sport. And like Craig said, nobody knows what ADCC and IBJJF is. When I say, hey, I want an Olympic gold medal and I'm a skeet shooter or I'm a downhill skier, it's like, man, somebody like me would go, man, that's sick. Like, you want an Olympic gold. But if you say, hey, I want ADCC, people are going to have way more questions. What is ADCC? Abu Dhabi? What do you went to the Middle East? There's going to be so many more questions. It's just ADCC isn't what they think they are.
Yeah. And I feel like none of this would be possible or even be spoken about if it weren't for everything that Craig has been doing. Because I remember when all this stuff was kind of just beginning to happen, you kind of don't even realize the severity of how underpaid they are until it's like therapy. Like, you don't really realize what your problem is until you actually like verbalize it and you speak things through. And then when you actually hear some of the complaints from the athletes of like, hey, I'm getting ready to compete in the biggest competition of my life, and I have to share a hotel room with this random person that I don't know on the strip, and I can't get any sleep. And, you know, there's just a bunch of different little things that they can't voice because that is the end all be all of their jiu-jitsu career. And there's so much prestige behind it, and you don't want to piss off the wrong person and all this and that. It's kind of refreshing and eye-opening to see all these athletes kind of come out and give their take. And another person that did it, other than Fionn, which this guy is pointing out, had mentioned the 5K payout for the women's, is William Tackett. William Tackett also took to his YouTube channel that he isn't going to be competing, and that the reason for it is because they're not sure if CJI is even going to be a thing next year. Obviously, like you said, Metamoris isn't a thing anymore. So what is your take on the sustainability of CJI, and if we're actually going to be seeing it next year?
I kind of know some behind the scenes stuff and Fight Pass and like the Fight Pass Invitational and obviously a couple of these other events. And I try not to like speak out of turn, especially because I do know some things that, you know, other people might not be privy to, but it's not my place to say these things, right? And so all I'll say is that money's out there. Money is out there to be given to events, right? There are so many rich people in jiu-jitsu. There's so many different corporations. There's so many different businesses that would love to partner with jiu-jitsu events, right? And so you just need people designated to making that happen. But it is out there. That's what I'm saying. Like, I've seen people go from, you know, hey, we're giving $2,000 out to, hey, we're going to do a $10,000 purse or a $20,000 purse. Obviously, I've been around EBI for a long time, been to a bunch of EBIs. Like, again, I know like what some of these guys go, like there are corporations out there that would love to write you a $50,000 check. So even if ADCC was like, hey, we're going to pay out $40,000 to the division winners this year, I guarantee with some work, and probably not even that much work, they could have found 8 corporations that would have donated $40,000, and it could have been like, hey, this is the 77 kilogram division, and they are the Dasani water chain, you know, whatever, right? Like, it's the 77 kilogram is sponsored by this company, and the 66 is sponsored by this coconut water company, and, you know, yada, 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 right? But they could have found it. But again, when you see somebody that just believes, hey, it's all about the front, it's all about ADCC, you're just lucky to be here. Well, turns out you can't eat medals, right? You can't, hey, I finished 3rd place at ADCC, or some of these guys that finished first, they make $10,000, but nobody's running to go buy a Claudio Calasan's DVD, right? So a lot of people probably don't even know who that name is. He's an ADCC absolute champion, but most people in jiu-jitsu have no clue who he is. And he has not made that easy $1 million that some of these guys talk about. And, you know, maybe that's on Claudio for not taking, I don't know, but I just know that they could find a way to pay these guys more. And I don't think it would be that hard. That's my big argument. If I like sat down with somebody from like Mo, I'd be like, well, look, and he would go, well, we're doing that. You don't understand. I hear you. But I just know you could have found $20,000 corporate. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are rash guard companies out there. They could have probably got Epic Roll or X Marshall. Those guys would have given them $20,000 to be like, hey, the athletes of the 66 kilogram division have to wear X Marshall gear. Boom, they're writing a $20,000 check, and now that's how you pay the athlete. Like, hire me, somebody.
Yeah, you need to be the brains behind how we can get more sponsorships and stuff. No, I hear you 100%. I know we're getting close to time here because I don't want to take up too much of your time, Matt. But before I let you go, I was going to bring up one more comment that someone had put. Basically, Fionn doesn't have a match coming up yet. So she kind of hinted, and Craig also hinted, that they're working on something, and that if it does come to fruition, it's going to be big. She also said that this is going to be able to set up another huge super fight in the future, because now she can challenge whoever the ADCC championship is down the line. Could that be on PGF or something? I don't know. That would be freaking cool. So first of all, who do you think Fionn could be going up against at CJI? And then who is your favorite to win ADCC women's division under 55 now?
Oh, I mean, that's tough because obviously when you take Fionn out, and there's going to be competitors that look, because I've had a couple guys that have been invited to ADCC, and they've kind of messaged me and just, what's your thoughts on this situation, right? And I'm like, look, it is like, if you think now, especially with some of these guys getting pulled out, if you think you have a shot to win ADCC, then it's probably worth it, So a lot of these women are probably going, hey, Fionn's out now. This division's up for grab. I think you have to look at somebody like Brianna Stay-Marie, even though she's been pretty quiet the past year. I feel like, she's got a phenomenal shot. She obviously got beat pretty bad by Fionn the last time they had a match. But without her in there, I think she's an absolute technician. She's a wizard on the mat. And I would love to see, somebody like her, I think could do very, very well. But there's also a couple of the Brazilian girls. Obviously, Atos always has some really strong females. And I think it's going to come down to either the Canadian Stay-Marie or one of the Brazilians. They're going to end up being the champion of that division. And I think somebody like, Alex Enriquez, or because I'm imagining Alex is probably going to get the invite. She obviously won East Coast trials and then went to West Coast and got second. I mean, she's tough in that rule set, but I don't know. I think Stay-Marie is like, she's next level, and I think she's going to win the gold if she comes back to ADCC.
Wow. Okay. And who do you think is going to be the surprise person at CJI for?
To me, this is probably a pretty easy one. It's going to be an MMA fighter. There's obviously a couple of names that people can probably just think of right off the bat. You've got some MMA fighters like that.
Mackenzie Dern?
I mean, Mackenzie Dern's the name that I'm thinking. I think that's the obvious choice, because she has talked about how interesting it would be to go back and do ADCC and just kind of see where she fits now with the females. To me, Mackenzie Dern versus, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on her name? Fionn Davis is the obvious matchup to make. I mean, that's a huge match. And to me, that's obvious. Just with having heard what Mackenzie's been saying recently about wanting to get back in. And she kind of mentioned like, hey, it'd be cool to go back and compete in jiu-jitsu. So I think that's the match that's going to happen. I think they're going to probably get paid pretty damn well, and they're going to be two happy ladies, regardless of the outcome. But I definitely think Fionn's the best female we have seen, and I think she beats Mackenzie Dern. But Mackenzie looks good. I don't know. That'll be interesting. I will definitely tune into that one. But she to me is the obvious choice.
I love that. Well, that is very exciting stuff. Someone in the group chat asked me what I will be watching. I'll probably definitely be in Vegas that week. I don't have ADCC tickets. I'm not sure if CJI already put their tickets on sale. We're going to persuade Matt Skaff to book it over here for CJI action, even though we couldn't even persuade him to come to PGF. So I don't know how easy it'll be to get him over here to Las Vegas, but thank you guys so much for joining. I know we have a few more questions, so I just want to say what's up to all the people that joined. Make sure you guys smash that like button, because we just took up 48 minutes of Matt Skaff's time, and he has all the historical data that we need to know about the jiu-jitsu world. So I'm super grateful for your time, and I can't wait to see what news we have coming up. And I hope all these manifestations that Elijah Carlton, Travis Thomas is making about trying to get added to the CGI roster come to fruition, because I feel like we're going to have a lot of news coming up shortly here. And yes, hit that like button, says John B. All right, guys, we'll see you later.